Good evening, everyone. Let me just change my settings so that everybody can come in for the rest of the evening. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Pink for College 101 group. Thanks for being here tonight. I'm here with Brad Schiller, co-founder of Prompt. And we've been doing this, we've been doing presentations. This is like the third or fourth this season so far.
Yeah, Brad? I think it's actually we're up to, this is the fourth this year.
Time. So far, yep. Helping parents and students. If your students are on here tonight, that's great. If they're not and you want to pull them, maybe you could grab them to come sit on this presentation because they'll learn a lot. Brad's gonna walk you through tons of stuff that he has learned over. How many years have you been growing?
What, like 8 years? Mm-hmm. Actually, yeah, it's about 8 years now. Yeah.
Wow. About how your student can write essays, and really more importantly what colleges are looking for in the essays. So just really quick housekeeping. One is, love to always know where people are watching from. I'm assuming everybody has their student who's going into college in the fall, but have they started their essay yet? You can just give us like a quick yes, no, it's okay if they haven't. This is still middle of July. Brad and I were just talking. Understandably, we think a lot of families, parents and students just are taking a break, from school, from COVID, enjoying the summer weather. August will be a really important time to get these essays started. So let us know.
And then I also always like to ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most concerned, how concerned are you about your students' essays, right? And that could be, even if they haven't started at all, you might be extremely concerned or not concerned that they're going to do it. And be successful with it. But I always like to have that piece of this as well.
Great. I'm just looking at some of the responses.
Bunch of 10s. People that show up at this are generally 9s and 10s.
That's what we have learned.
I would say.
That's a good point.
If not, you might not be here, right?
So this is recorded. We will send out the recording tomorrow. We also had requested, if anybody had wanted to send in a draft, and we have a few. So Brad's going to use those. Whoever sent it in, you are not identified, but it is up to you if you want to ask questions while we share your essay or not. It's perfectly fine, but just want to know that we kind of randomly picked 3 of the essays that were sent in. And I think we should just get going.
Yeah, let's do this. So just so everybody knows, please drop in any questions that you have along the way into the chat. Debbie is fantastic about interrupting me. She sometimes reminds me about things that I should be talking about that I forget to talk about. There's so many awesome, really important pieces of content that we cover. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get kicked off for today. And basically, this is what we're going to be covering. We're going to be talking about how colleges evaluate applicants. Really important. Before you actually write an essay, you need to know, what should this essay be about? What does my audience actually care about? How am I being evaluated, or how are your students being evaluated? We're going to talk about what colleges are and aren't looking for in essays. We're going to do live feedback on essay topics that many of you submitted. We're going to talk about the ideal timeline for working on your applications. Hint: start now if you have not started yet. We have people starting, months ago. So it's important. This is a great time to go ahead and get started. We'll talk about that.
Okay, you can vocalize it, but I don't have to
talk about Prompt's coaching, our essay, college application and essay coaching, and a tonight only discount that we have for one of our things. It's the biggest discount of the year on our common application essay coaching, which we'll talk about. And then we're going to do live feedback on 3 of the essays that you submitted and take any and all questions along the way. I have not read any of these essays. I like to go in cold, completely cold. So we will see how it goes this evening, but I always enjoy doing that. Just a real quick housekeeping about us. So We've been around for 8 years now. Last year, we coached over 6,000 students one-on-one on their college applications and essays, including hundreds of road to college families. And we help students get accepted to their top choice colleges. 98% of the students that we work with get into one or more of their top choice colleges, defined as their reach colleges or their target colleges. And actually 3 in 4 students that we work with get into at least one of their reach colleges. These are kind of unheard of numbers, and we'll get into why that is. And it's because we help students understand what their audience actually cares about with essays. Okay. All right. If at any point in time you want to just check out what we're doing and what the discounts are, you can go to prompt.com/road-to-college. Debbie will drop that into the chat. Then you can just check that out and peruse if you want to as we are chatting this evening. All right. So what do admissions officers care about? This is the most important question that you have to have your students understand. Because if you don't know what they care about, you don't know what to write about. Simple as that. Okay. And the simple story is that admissions officers want to know that your student will succeed in college and after they graduate. Now, the only way to prove success is basically from your students' experiences that show certain traits that they exhibit, that those traits are going to signal that they're more likely to be successful in college and more likely to be successful after they graduate. This is really important for colleges. Okay, why is it important? Well, what do colleges care about? They care about students going and they care about students graduating. They care about students paying tuition all 4 years. They care about creating a really nice community at the school where everybody has a good positive feelings about the college. So that way, when they graduate, they can maybe tell their friends to go to the college. They can maybe donate money back to the college. These are all things that are really important for the college to improve their US News rankings, to improve the amount of tuition that they could charge. It's all the stuff that they care about, right? So what they care most about is that if we accept your student, they're going to be successful in college, defined as graduating, defined as doing well in classes, and they're going to be successful after they graduate, okay? Getting a job, right? Having a positive feeling about the school and the institution, maybe donating money back in the future, or doing great things that will reflect really well back on the school, right? This is very important for them, and that's how they are evaluating or what they are thinking about as they're evaluating your student. Okay, so how do they do this? The simple way to look at this is there's kind of 3 categories of things, okay, for most schools look at. Academics, the personal side, which is like the non-academic side, and then other priorities that they may have, okay? Academics is essentially, they take all your grades, the strength of curriculum that your student takes, some information about your high school, sometimes like how successful have students been actually from your high school that went to the school. So they'll actually take a look sometimes at like, hey, how are students actually performing grade-wise at the school that your student is at that were previous alumni of your high school. And then test scores like APs, IBs, SAT, ACT, if you are submitting that, right? And that kind of gets all rolled up into a single score. We won't talk too much about that today. It's really important to understand there's the academic side, and we'll talk about why that is in a second. Then there's the personal score, which is the non kind of academics, right? So these are your activities, which is and also how you write about them, your essays, what you write about and how you write about it, recommendations, interview if applicable. This is what we're going to focus on because this is like probably the thing that you can affect the most right now. Okay. Then they have other priorities like, do you want to actually go to the school? Might be family income, first generation, geography, legacies, athletes. There's a whole bunch of different priorities that you can't really change right now. Okay. So we're not going to talk about those this evening. But they're kind of just, if you're intellectually interested in college admissions, they're interesting to think about. But they're completely irrelevant probably for how you need to think about admissions. All right. Okay. So how does this work? Well, basically your student gets an academic score and they get a personal score. Okay. The academic score is pretty simply, we have what's called an academic bar. Okay. So once the student has a certain level of academics, then that signals that, okay, a student with this level of academics is going to be successful at our college academically. Okay. In which case, like, great. Once you're above that bar, your chances of acceptance goes up massively. Be below the bar and chances are you're not going to be accepted. Okay. There's also a personal bar, but almost nobody's below the personal bar because guess what? If you're below the personal bar, that basically signals that you have like character flaws, okay? Like you happen to write your essay about how you like stealing stuff, right? That would be an example of, okay, maybe that person is below the personal bar. Almost nobody's below the personal bar. But basically, the higher your academic score and the higher your personal score is, the higher your admissions chances. Makes sense, okay? So how does this break down? All right. Now, a lot of people think academics is like just so important, but guess what? Colleges have far more academically qualified applicants than spots. And so students actually self-select where they're applying based off of their academics. So for the most part, let's say a school gets Georgia Tech gets about 40,000 applicants a year, okay? 4 and 5 of those applicants will be above their academic bar. 4 and 5 applicants will be above MIT's academic bar. 4 and 5 applicants will be above Harvard's academics or Michigan's academic bar, et cetera, because everybody's self-selecting where they're applying. This is what the data shows, okay? And even amongst that, basically you could break that into 3 categories: exceptional academics, which is like almost nobody, okay? Strong academics and sufficient academics. Those are basically the same numbers of students. And once your student's in one of those categories, they're virtually indistinguishable from every single other student in that academic category. So if you have 40,000 applicants, or let's use easy numbers, 50,000 applicants, that means 20,000 applicants have strong academics, and that school might only accept 2,000. Okay? So there's basically 20,000 applicants that are virtually indistinguishable academics, and another 20,000 applicants that have good enough academics to succeed at that college, right? This is where essays come in. This is where all the non-academic side of the applications come in, because only 1 in 5 applicants have strong personal scores. Okay, and this is actual data based off of, so colleges don't like releasing this information, but there's a big Supreme Court case coming up, I think next year with Harvard admissions, and they had to release like thousands of pages of information about their entire application process. I have literally read through thousands of pages and took all their data, synthesized it, and this is what it comes to, okay? And that is the same. This applies, by the way, pretty much across every single institution, right? This is the way to think about it. Only 1 in 5 students have strong, essays. Now, a lot of these students all have really good extracurricular activities. So what is setting those students apart? Who becomes strong? And the answer is, it's because what you write about and how you write about it, right? It's all those components in your essays, how you write about this in your activities list, your additional information section, perhaps what ends up in the recommendations, and that is critical. And so how much of an effect does this really have, right? So if you go from sufficient to strong academics, that will increase your admissions chances by 3x. If you move from sufficient to strong personal scores, that will increase your admissions chances by 10x. For many colleges, the really highly selective ones, roughly 3/4 of all students that they accept are both strong academically and strong strong personal scores. Okay, so that's kind of an important way to think about this, right? So a lot of times you don't know where do you fit. Like, are you a strong academic score? Are you not a strong academic score? So it's kind of hard to tell what that is, because it's a fairly complex formula. It's really important to just put a really good foot forward and have the best writing possible within your essays that clearly explain why you're a compelling applicant and why you're going to be successful in college and beyond, right? How do you differentiate yourself from other applicants? And we're going to talk about that in a minute.
So Brad, what you just described, it doesn't only relate to like the uber selective, like the top 10 schools.
Everything.
It relates to most schools that are doing what they would call a holistic review.
Yes, that's correct. Now, there is certain situations where, because you're accepting let's say you're a college with like a 50% acceptance rate, and you know that 20% of your applicants have strong academics, you're accepting almost all 20% of those applicants with strong academics, right? That makes sense just because you look at the admit rates, and that, so even if you just have sufficient essays, that's totally fine. I'm going to talk about when essays matter, when they don't, but that's an example of like, okay, your essays may not matter that much if you know that you're in you strongly believe you're in strong academic profile, okay? But for many institutions, that you may be applying to that have a 30% admit rate or a 25% admit rate or lower, that's when things start really, really mattering. Okay. And that doesn't just go for the schools, that goes for certain programs at certain schools that have different acceptance rates than others. Okay. So if you're applying to the business school at Indiana University, that's very difficult from an acceptance rate standpoint versus the rest of the university, which I think is like a 60 or 70% admission rate. I don't know what the admission rate is for the business school, but you hear a lot of students that want to go to business school there, Indiana Bloomington, that don't get in. Okay, because different programs are much more selective than others, because they might only have like 1,000 seats for a certain program out of 15,000 students, or they might have 200 seats out of 3,000 students. So that really matters, these highly desirable programs. So when do essays matter, right? Highly selective colleges, these are the Ivy and Ivy equivalents of the world, like the UC Berkeley, UCLA, those types of institutions. That's essays really matter. Second is selective colleges where your academics are sufficient but not strong compared to other applicants. This could be like a Boston University or Northeastern, those types of institutions, okay? Large colleges where you're applying to highly desirable programs such as computer science, right, STEM degrees. We just talked about business programs tend to be this, or really desirable out-of-state institutions like a University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, for example, or those, or sometimes Illinois in some cases, right? Or for computer science, as we're talking about, like University of Washington is a great example of this, where, hey, if you're applying to computer science at University of Washington, it's much more difficult than applying to humanities at the University of Washington, just because of the demand, right, for the students, okay? And so that's kind of when you could tell that, okay, these are situations where essays matter more. There's other situations when essays matter less, right? And so those are like selective colleges where your academics are strong compared to other applicants, right? So this could be like Georgia Tech. You have really strong academics. Georgia Tech gets 40,000 applicants a year. They're accepting 8,000 or 10,000 or so of the students. So many times students with very strong academics are just going to get in despite not having great essays. That's very common, okay? And essays matter less for large colleges where you're applying in states or less competitive programs. This could be like Auburn, Baylor, those types of things. I'm not saying that those are not difficult to get into in many cases, but they just have higher acceptance rates and they tend to go more on academics than on essays. Unless you're kind of in that sufficient academic category and they're trying to differentiate you and decide if you get it. So that's the general breakdown of how this works, okay? So let me talk a little about how many essays that you'll write across your applications. The common application is not live yet, so you may not realize how many essays you have to write, especially if you're a student that is, this is the first student you've had go through the college application process. But it's surprising. There's a lot of essays that you may need to write depending on the institutions you're applying to. So if you're applying to less selected colleges, more in-state institutions, large public institutions, you might only need to write the common application essay, maybe 1 or 2 extra essays that are for a specific school, which are called supplemental essays. And you might only have to write like 1, maybe 0, maybe 3 or 5. It may not be too much. But when you start getting to more selective colleges, they decide to just add more essays on because it helps them in their evaluation process, okay? And so with that, you might be writing 5 to 20 essays, okay? And so on and so forth. So like UNC Chapel Hill will have 2 essays to write, etc. And those essays, they have a little bit of overlap amongst schools, but it's very difficult or it's challenging to take the exact same essay and use it across multiple schools without changing the word count or slightly changing the content in many ways, okay? And then if you're applying to many of the different highly selective schools, we have students that are writing 20, 40, 50, or 60 essays because some schools actually have like 7 or 8. And some of these are like only 50 words or 250 words, but this really, really, really does matter, okay? Just the quantity of work that your students will maybe be doing, and you should start getting a sense of how much work is this going to be. And I'll show you how you could do that later by using a free tool in our system. But start getting this sense now, because you don't want to be waiting until like the beginning of October to start your essays. And now you have 30 essays to write before the November 1st early action or decision deadlines. That's not what you want to be doing, right? This is like the time that you want to get started, because all of the schools, almost all the schools, will have all of their essays released around August 1st, and many of them have them released already if you have time to get started now.
And Brett, somebody actually also already asked about, do essays matter for merit scholarships? So that's kind of like another layer.
Yeah, so
above all this.
many schools will have, so my favorite type of scholarship is this, not the private scholarships, but actually the scholarships the schools offer. Okay. And many of those, to be considered for merit scholarships, may have additional essays that you need to write, and those do really matter. Okay. And in our one-on-one coaching programs, we include all of those, if there are any of those extra merit essays at those institutions, or let's say you're applying to an honors program that you want to get into, a lot of those have extra essays. If you're applying to certain majors, you might have extra essays, like a lot of engineering majors will have extra essays, or nursing majors will have extra essays, or business school, you want to apply for business, they'll have extra essays. The number of essays that you may need to write, depending on the types of programs you're applying to, could be a lot. Okay. And I just want to, kind of call that out here. And I'll show you how to do that later and see how many you're doing. Okay. Now for probably the most important part of this whole spiel today. We're going to talk about what colleges are and aren't looking for in essays, right? So, and you remember, we talked about the purpose of the college application is for your student to prove that they'll be successful in college and after they graduate, right? So how do they do that? Well, they do that for these 5 traits, which we'll talk about in a second. But before we get there, is like, this ties into what I always say is like the absolute biggest myth in all of college essays, which is that everybody tells you that essays are about telling your story. Okay. And this is incomplete information. So what ends up happening is because many admissions officers, and it's funny because we have tons of quotes from admissions officers where like, all they're saying is like, oh, we just want to get to know you. We just want you to tell your story. We want to learn something about you, right? And guess what? That's just not being super truthful with how they're actually evaluating the applicants, okay? What they're really wanting to do is that you want you to tell your story that proves you'll be successful in college and beyond. Right. So they want your story to exhibit these 5 traits that we're now going to talk about. OK. And so if you're going to walk away with 2 things from this entire thing that we're talking about today, one is remember that the purpose of the college application is to prove success in college and beyond. And the second is these are the 5 traits that prove you'll be successful. Okay, so you want to write about experiences that are related to one or more of these 5 traits. You don't have to touch on all of them. Not all students have all of them, but you really want to focus on your strengths. So let me talk about each of the 5. Then we're going to get into talking about good topics and bad topics for essays. We're going to take a look at some topics from different people. If you have different topics you're thinking about writing about, drop those into the chat now, because we'll be able to discuss those as well as we go through this section. But this is how we evaluate every essay that we're going to look at. We're going to be thinking about these 5 traits. Every topic we think about, we're going to be thinking about these 5 traits and how do we apply these 5 traits to those topics. Okay. So the first is drive. Okay. So these are students that push themselves to succeed no matter how long the odds are. They might be in a challenging situation or just solving a difficult problem. And they're pushing through, right? They're coming out a better person. They're figuring it out. And they're not passively sitting by and letting stuff happen to them. They're actually taking action to better their situation or to improve. Okay. A lot of colleges call this grit. I prefer drive. Or perseverance is what some people say. But these are students that colleges love, because when you are in college, chances are you're going to come up upon a challenging situation and they want you to push through that situation. They don't want you to drop out. Okay. That's really important. Second is intellectual curiosity. So these are students that love learning just for the fun of it in their free time to gain a deeper understanding of different subjects or topics in which they're interested in. This is one of the traits that a lot of students don't even know they have. They just don't even know. Okay. Or they don't even know that colleges care about this. Because I bet many of you here could just think about, oh, my student really thinks so, like they're always spending time about like learning about XYZ topic, right? Engaging with like different online communities or Discord, working with their friends on different things. There's a lot of people that might be like makers and like building different stuff, right? There might be people that are like writing their own music. There might be people that are creating social media stuff. There might be people that are just learning about World War II or different other things, right? There's so many things to be intellectually curious about. And a lot of students don't realize that the colleges are interested in that because they're like, oh, that's just normal for me. That's who I am. Well, colleges want to know this because the more intellectually curious you are, the more likely you are to pick a major that you're interested in, and therefore like actually self-study, be really interested in it, do well in the major, and do well in your future life, right? The more intellectually curious somebody is, the better they're going to do in college and in life. Okay. I had no idea that this is what should be written about when I was applying to college. What was that, 20 years ago now? And I had no clue, right? And so, for example, and this is like early stages of the internet, like my school didn't offer a couple different AP exams, so I decided I was going to self-study and take those exams, and I did well on them. But you know what? You can't rely on your admissions officer to be like, oh, look at this AP score. Oh, they didn't actually take they don't have that class on your transcript, right? It's kind of weird, right? You can't rely on them to figure these things out, okay? And so I had like so many things I was like really deeply intellectually curious about and spent a lot of time on. And guess what? I didn't write about any of that in my entire application. But it happened to come up in my interview for MIT. And I did get into MIT. I went to MIT. But the thing that I found was I got to look at my interviewer notes on my application. They make like 3 to 5 sentences of notes. And in those 3 to 5 sentences of notes was only maybe like one thing that came up in one of my essays, and the rest were actually from my interview notes. I had no idea what I was doing, right? But that happened to come up in my interview. So they were able to identify that I was very intellectually curious. They were able to identify a lot of traits of like initiative and drive and things that were not really included in my essays, okay? Don't leave it up to that kind of chance, okay? You don't want to do that. The third is initiative. So these are students that are really entrepreneurial, not willing to accept the status quo. Basically, every single thing, organization they're a part of, or any single group of people they're a part of, or anything that they see, they're like, this could be better, okay? And not only are they identifying how to make it better, they're actually taking action and making it better, right? These are the people that are the leaders, whether or not they have a formal leadership title, they are leading and making things better and making people around them better and everything they touch better, right? So when they're on campus at a college, they're going to make things better naturally. And when they leave, it's going to be better than the whole campus community is going to be better than when they arrived, okay? Fourth is contribution. So these are people that are kind of the connective tissue of communities, right? So they're the people that whatever group of people they're a part of, that group is better as a result of their being there, okay? They're continuously making others better, and they're continuously drawing other people to them in many cases. Colleges love these kinds of people because they're the connective tissue across campus, right? They're oftentimes the connective tissue in a community after graduation, or in a business, or whatever job or whatever they're going into in life, right? These people colleges love because they're the ones that make the campus community work, okay? Fifth is diversity of experiences. So colleges want people with different life experiences, different ways of thinking about the world that can add unique perspectives to the student body so people can learn from each other and make deeper connections across different in areas of interest or different backgrounds or other things like that. This is really important to many, many, many colleges. And this is why, even at like I always joke, even at Princeton University or Penn, they don't want every student graduating from there to go to work on Wall Street, right? They want people to go do a lot of different things. And so what's interesting here is like, even at a school, I'm only using Harvard as an example because it is publicly released data now, is that even at a school like Harvard, where they don't care really what you're majoring in, they do ask like what your major is, what you may want to do in life, and they actually care a lot about that. So if you're applying to Harvard, and this is older data, so this is actually when their applications were 2/3 of what they are now. So they're 60,000 a year now. They used to be 40,000 a year. So back in like 2019, only if you were applying to Harvard and you wanted to go into medicine, your acceptance rate was only 4%. If you applied to Harvard and you wanted to be a teacher, your acceptance rate was 12%. Okay, they care about this, right? Different. This is the same goes for like, hey, if you want to go to a school with like a computer to get a computer science degree, a lot of people want to get computer science degrees now, right? And so they're not going to take everybody. Like University of Washington is not going to be, hey, we're a computer science institution now. That's all we do, right? That we're Carnegie Mellon. Like that's not what they're going to do, right? And so that's just like, think about this. Like, I'm not saying like when you're applying to school, write about how you want to be a teacher when you actually want to go work on Wall Street or you want to go into medicine. Don't do that, right? That's kind of, you could spell that a mile away in the essays that students are writing, but just be aware of it. It's very helpful to just think through, hey, what are those diverse experiences? What are those different things that I can write about that kind of set me apart maybe from other students? Okay, so a couple things I'm going to talk about, then we're going to get to all the different topics. There's no such thing as a bad topic, provided it relates to one or more of these 5 traits. Many people will tell you, oh, don't write about music, or don't write about athletics, or don't write about drama, or don't write about / theater, right? Or don't write about community service, or don't write about like a mission trip that you went on, right? And guess what? The reason why people are saying that is because for many people, those end up being really bad essays. That's why they say it, because people will write an essay about music. They'll be like, oh, I just love music. I love listening to music. Music is great. And I learned nothing about the 5 traits that are associated with that student. But I could be writing about music, and I'm like writing my own music. I created my own band. I'm booking my own shows. And guess what? All of a sudden, now that essay is related to drive, intellectual curiosity, initiative, like diversity experiences, like all sorts of different things, right? But it's an essay about music. And so we end up finding that a lot of students are like, well, somebody told me I shouldn't write about that because it's about music. It's like, well, let's actually dive into the details and understand what you actually did, what experiences you actually had, how do those relate to the 5 traits? So we can determine, is that actually your most compelling thing that you should maybe be writing about, okay? And so this is really common, but it's really important to remember that, yes, there are some things that are much more difficult to write about, like the stuff that I talked about, like athletics and such, but as long as you're related to one or more of these 5 traits and it's your most compelling content, you should be writing about it, okay? The next really important thing, content, clarity, readability are critical. The average application is read for 8 minutes. That's not just essays, right? That is all the academic stuff, information about maybe your high school, basically the entire application, 8 minutes. Okay, now some are more, some are less, but just think of it that way. So you can't have the person reading your entire application, going through it and not understanding what your student is talking about on the first read, because you're getting one read. Okay, and it's a fast read. And once somebody, and we'll see this when we start going through examples of essays, once you're reading the start of the essay and you're like, I have no idea where this essay is going, automatically anybody, right? Think about any article you read, anything that you're doing, you're like, any email you might read for a job, you're like, I don't want to read the rest of this, right? I don't know what is relevant here. I'm not even going to bother reading it. Or you're just like mentally a little bit checked out. That's what happens to people naturally. That's what happens to admissions officers. So what matters the most is content, clarity, readability. And guess what? The things that a lot of people think about when they're thinking about college admissions essays, which are creativity and beautiful prose, are not important. But the example essays that you see online that are held up as shining examples of great college admissions essays are generally creative and do a lot of times have beautiful prose. And why is that? They're more entertaining to read. And so that's why they're the examples that people put online that they want other people to read. And that's what happens. Okay. But guess what? That's not, if you actually ask an admissions officer to break down that entire essay of the things they actually cared about or that jumped out at them in those essays, it's not the creativity and it's not the beautiful prose part. It's the content, clarity, and readability. Okay. It's the content that matters, right? The content that relates to the 5 traits. Okay. So yes, if your student's applying to a creative writing program, maybe their essay should be a little bit more creative, right? Fine. If they just have a creative bent and can write something that's creative with really clear, great, compelling content that's very clear and readable, great, go for it. But it's not a requirement. Because guess what? 99.9% of students are just going to write a really solid, like, well, they write a bad essay, but you know, the ones that work with us, like 99+% of them are writing really solid, very clear, very still entertaining essays, but they're not like have these like metaphors and beautiful prose and all of that stuff that it just doesn't matter that much. Okay. And you know, we have the acceptance rates to show it, right, of what matters. Okay. The other thing, you're writing a lot of essays, but every single essay is important. Too many students spend all of their time on their common application essay because it's the one essay that gets used across many, many different schools. Guess what? That's nice, but those supplemental essays, those extra essays that colleges are having you write, those colleges care about those essays. It's not like they go through and they're like, oh, this was a great common application essay. That essay gets a 10 out of 10. This other essay that's 50 words, that gets a 5 out of 10. They're not doing that. They're not scoring each essay and adding up the points, and they're not weighting the common application essay substantially more than the other essays in many cases. Okay. What matters is the whole picture of all the essays as they fit together that shows your personal brand, which is like which of those 5 traits you have. Okay. That's what they care about. All right. And so many students struggle with this. They spend hours and hours and hours perseverating on their common application essay. It becomes like they finally get their common application essay done maybe a week before the first deadline, and then they're scrambling to finish all those supplemental essays. They don't spend enough time on them, and then they don't get into the schools that they're top choice colleges because they didn't put enough of the time and effort in and care into those other essays. And I was talking to the dean of admissions. I did an event with him from the University of Richmond. And he was like, yeah, I could tell when the student wrote the supplemental essay from my school the night before the application was due. I could tell because the quality of essays are completely different. Like it's very incoherent. Like I don't really understand what's going on. It's like, how much does that student really want to go to the University of Richmond if they're not going to put the time in? And he was like, he's like, just easy rejection. Okay. Just one example. So that really matters, and you don't want to let this happen to you or your students, because there's a lot of essays that need to be written, and we see this because over 90% of all applications for college are submitted within 2 days of the deadline. Okay, over 90%. So that means that the vast majority of students are procrastinating. How do you set your student apart? Right, you get them done early. You spend the time on them. You make this work. Okay, that's really important. Almost every student that we work with is done usually weeks in advance of the deadline for their top choice colleges. Okay. Let's talk about a few topics that were submitted. If you have other topics, please jump them into the chat. Any questions that came up, Debbie, before we
maybe before you go to topics, there's a question about what's the difference between the college admission essay and a scholarship essay?
Good question. So for certain colleges, this is so complicated sometimes, but for certain colleges, the scholarship essays will be read in conjunction with the other essays. Okay, so they're kind of like almost like extra supplemental type essays to the overall application. For certain scholarship programs for a specific college, they may read them separately from the essays for admissions, in which case it's okay to have like content overlap. But the scholarship essays are typically, you want to relate also to those 5 traits. Right? Because those 5 traits are universal. It doesn't just matter for college admissions. If I'm hiring somebody, I'm looking for those 5 traits, right? You know, grad school, they're looking for those 5 traits. It's like everybody's looking for those, right? So, you know, when you're doing applying for a scholarship, they want students that are exceptionally driven and that they know that if they get the scholarship money, they're going to have a substantial and meaningful impact on that student's life in terms of like those external scholarships from certain colleges. And even the ones that are, you know, school specific as well. So, you know, you just have to look at the prompts, like what are they looking for, right? Now, I will say some scholarships may care a little bit more maybe about some of the creativity of writing, probably depends on it because they might publish the essay later. It really depends. I couldn't really say for each of them. I've just seen that a little bit occasionally. Like the New York Times, for example, cares about it. One of our students actually won like a big New York Times scholarship a couple of years ago, which was kind of cool. But yeah, that's always think about the same stuff, right? Content, clarity, readability, the 5 traits, that's what matters.
So here's another question. This person wants to know, should they be finding out about the essays now, the essay prompts, and particularly any additional essays, but they're not sure if they're available because the applications don't open until August 1st.
Yeah, so a bunch of them are now available. I'll show you a tool within our platform that you can access for free. I'll show you how to do that, that you could type in the list of schools that you're applying to, and we'll bring every single essay that you need to write up. Okay, I'll cover that. It's probably going to be like 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay. And then I have 2 topics that.
Okay, yeah, let's start these first, and then we'll get to those 2 topics because we may cover some of the material for those other ones. Okay. Cool. So this one, I like this first one, so I put it first. It was also the first one Debbie sent me. So, so we had to choose 3 words that represent what we want to be as a black belt during my Taekwondo black belt test. So I thought I'd write about each of these words. Okay, that could make a really good essay, right? Because you can make it really clear and readable by basically just starting each section of your essay with a different word, for example. And that tends to work pretty well because like short sentences, varying sentence length makes it really engaging to read and easy to understand. Now, the critical component of this is each of those words, you need to actually relate to specific experiences that prove that you are that word. Okay, so if drive was one of your words, don't just say drive. Oh, look at me doing my Taekwondo moves, right? I'm really driven, right? That's not going to be that interesting. But if you tie it to something that's an experience outside of Taekwondo, where you're also really driven, and maybe it's like not just one experience that showcases you're driven, but like 2 examples of it, that can be really cool. So that I would agree that that's definitely a framing of an essay that you could do, provided that you're able to tie those different words to experiences that relate to the traits. And those words kind of relate to the traits in some way. Okay. All right. Life lessons learned from swimming. I wanted to cover this one because I see a lot of this type of stuff. And once again, this becomes challenging to relate to the 5 traits. Okay. Because I see a lot of these types of essays where it's like, oh, I'm in the pool and, I have to, swim really hard. And that taught me that, I have to push through challenging situations. It's like, well, what challenging situations did you have to push yourself through, right? So a lot of students begin to write in this like very philosophical way, but it's not actually showing me their experiences and the proof that they actually have these traits. Instead, they're saying, I kind of have this trait amorphously, and they kind of wax philosophical about, different swimming motions and what that means to them and that sort of thing. I'm way more interested as a reader in like, hey, I changed the angle of my hand slightly and I improved my speed by 1 second, right? Like that's way more interesting because now you're experimenting, you're showing some intellectual curiosity. That becomes a lot more compelling. Okay. Next one, possible topics, right? What I learned from watching international soccer games. Okay. Once again, like how do you relate this to proof that you're going to be successful in college and beyond, right? So how do you apply what you learned in these international soccer games, maybe to your life? How did that relate to certain ways that you approach different experiences that you went through and had a more successful result than you would have otherwise based off of what you learned? But just watching like, hey, I learned these things while watching these international soccer games. And now I learned that like I need to care more about people in the world because I'm seeing like, stadiums that are not as nice as other stadiums. That's not very compelling. Okay. Another one, right? Homeschooling, grades 2 through 8, shape me as a person. Well, generally speaking, you want to keep your essay topics within high school. Okay. The last kind of few years. Now, doesn't mean you can't hit on really important life moments prior to that, but that should be a very small percentage of the essay. Okay. So if you were to write about this, I could see it like being like a few sentences or a short paragraph at one point in the essay that kind of sets up as like, hey, this laid the foundation for me to go do all of these other things and become this really intellectually curious person. I could see that being the case. But a lot of times I see these essays where it's like the entire essay ends up being about homeschooling in grades like 2 through 5 or 2 through 8. and they're kind of, a lot of times the authors would be intentionally vague about when some of these things occurred, and it becomes very confusing as a reader. Okay. Writing about a finance club you started, yeah, it could be really compelling. The question is like, what did you do? What impact did you have? Like, all those things really matter, because a lot of people are like, hey, I started a club. It was myself and like 3 of my friends. That's a club. It's like, well, that's not that interesting. Like, what did you do? Did you learn about a bunch of stuff? Like, how did you learn about it? Right? Did you grow the club? Right? Did you grow up from 4 members to 30 members? How did you do it? Right? That becomes really interesting. Medical diagnosis, overcoming it, continuing to live it with it today. We see a lot of essays about medical challenges or medical problems. A common one is like, I tore my ACL playing a sport. I was devastated, and I had to have the normal ACL recovery. Now, usually they try to spice it up a little bit, but everybody's like, every reader is just like, hey, everybody that tore their ACL kind of had the same experience. Did this really kind of like make you this more meaningfully better person? And so the challenge here is like with the medical stuff is you can't focus too much on the medical stuff. Okay. You have to focus on like the journey to recovery or living with a certain condition. And then you not only need to do that, but you also need to talk about like, how did that affect other areas of your life or other actions that you wouldn't have maybe taken otherwise, except for this thing that occurred with you, right? So we see a lot of really compelling essays for like students with different learning disabilities, where they're able to talk about how they know they have this learning disability, and they were able to like set like different study structures, different ways of kind of their working in order to actually be successful as a result of that. And it's clear that, oh, this is a student that's really driven. They've kind of figured things out and how they need to work. They're going to be successful in college, right, and beyond, right? It's very clear. Another one, writing about playing the piano and life skills gained from that, or writing the piece about my piano teacher as a valuable mentor. These are challenging, right? Because when you write the essay about somebody else that's a mentor to you, you can use that like as like an instigating incident of like, hey, I have this mentor. They mentioned this one thing to me, or these few life lessons to me, and here's how I applied that across my life. That could be really compelling. But a lot of people are like, this piano teacher is great, or my parents are great, or my grandparents are great. Look how great they are. And the whole essay ends up being about this other person, right? Or, oh, I played the piano a lot. And I'm going to use that as like a mechanism for talking about like, hey, playing the piano is, a metaphor basically for these other things that they've done. And that becomes really challenging. Once again, as long as you could rate these to the 5 traits, you could show a lot of intellectual curiosity with music. You could show a lot of initiative. You could show a lot of different things, but students tend to have a lot of challenges when writing about some of these topics. Okay.
So Brad, another topic which isn't shown here, and somebody just asked, and let me read their question, but it's about mental,
Okay.
issues. So
I kind of left that one. I figured you were going to mention it.
Okay. So this person is asking if a child had severe anxiety and is now a student body secretary, so has pushed through a lot to become a leader, would it be better not to mention the mental health struggle, or does it show drive and contribution and growth?
Yeah, so it is such like a case-by-case basis. It's hard, like without knowing like all of the detailed specifics, it's really hard to say one way or the other. Okay, and the reason for that is, think about what colleges care about. They want to know that the student is going to be successful in college and beyond. So in cases where a student has severe anxiety, depression, other mental challenges, that sometimes raises a flag that says the reader, the admissions officer has to think, is this student capable of being successful in college and after they graduate? And in particular, they're mostly caring about like successful in college, okay, at their college. And unless you feel that the writing of that experience shows that they will be successful in college and that the anxiety is not going to cause a challenge with that, then maybe you can write about it more from the perspective of, look at all of the way that I've changed how I behave, how I act, how like the actions that I've taken. Here's what I've learned about myself. And like I'm this completely different and changed person as a result of all of these actions that I've taken. And now I'm like the student body secretary. I'm taking the initiative. I'm leading on all sorts of different things. And I'm feeling like great about all of that, you know, and like what I've realized from that is like, I really care about like leading others and making other things better for other people. And like, I'm like, whatever I do in life or decide to do in life, I want it to be related to that. That could be a very compelling essay, in which case like a very small piece of the essay kind of writing about that as kind of the instigating incident for this larger journey can be useful. But we really have to look at like the very specifics of the situation and whether or not adding that would actually add, you know, additional value. Okay. So as I said, like always think about it from the lens of like, how would an admissions officer look at the student on campus? Like if they saw this, would they be like, oh, this student is not going to be successful? Because I read a lot of essays that, you know, you see it like, I'll go into a lot of classrooms that like pre-COVID-19, I used to go into a lot of classrooms and I would see this all the time where students would have drafts and it was very like, it was kind of like they were using the college admissions essay as a mechanism to like talk about, here's all the bad stuff that's happened to me in life. Okay. And it was like, well, all of these things are not proving that you're going to be successful. If anything, they're going to make it look like maybe you aren't going to be successful. And it became, you know, it becomes challenging, right? So it's that understanding of the audience and then taking that lens to see like, okay, how would somebody interpret this is really important.
So I'm hoping, you know, people who are here tonight also recognize really a lot of what you're talking about, Brad, is the importance of planning before you even get to the writing per se,
Yeah.
You know, right? It's like, it's the discussion of these topics, figuring out what the right, you know, whatever you want, angle, what you want to really display, how you might reuse information across essays. That's all planning that can be happening now, even, you know, before
Even
pen
before
to paper.
you should. I always say fingers to keyboards or thumbs to phones.
I'm so old.
The kids are thumbs to phones, I think. We have kids that literally write their essays on their phones and submit them. And I'm like, what are you doing? This is taking like 3 times as long, right? I don't know. Not me, but yeah, like that whole piece, like there's so much plan, like with each student that we work with, the first step is they spend an hour and a half going through a planning module that I'll show you kind of in our system. Then they do an hour to an hour and a half call with their coach. And we go through all of the content and plan out, here's the content that we need to make sure gets covered across every single one of your applications. And then they match that content to each of the essays they're going to write, okay, with their coach helping them do that. That's really important. And then outlining your content for each of the essays. That's really important before you even start, you know, typing, if you will. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the timeline. I had to change this a little bit because we're now in July. Normally this says May or April over here. But the point is, like, it started now with the planning part of this, as Debbie's talking about. Once you finish that planning, you tie content to what you're going to write about for the common application essay, if you're going to do that, or if you're only applying to the University of California personal insight questions, you can do that, tie it to those, and then create an outline, start writing. Okay. Your goal is, by the way, most people finish their common app essay with us within 2 weeks of starting. Usually it's less than that. A lot of people within about a week. Then the goal is to complete your application for your top choice school. You want to do that before school starts. Really important. You'll feel a lot better about yourself. What you do is you work application by application. And our general philosophy is we want the students that we work with to complete their applications for their top 3 choice schools by the end of August. Okay, so they're heading into their senior year. They have all the applications done for their top 3 choice schools. They may make a modification or two to an essay as they actually have like 2 months of experience at school before they actually do that. Sometimes as we're writing an essay, the student's like, hey, I'm going to do this. And they actually like write what they did before they actually do it, which is also actually a pretty powerful way to think about like, hey, I need to do this because it will make my essay so much stronger. So we do that with the students. Now we have a bunch of students that start in September, October, and obviously that timeline gets very compressed, and now they're having to do it in the midst of also studying for exams, writing other papers, doing all their activities. Those are the things that you don't want to be doing. You want to be like, hey, I'm done with my top 3 choice applications. And then from there, now it becomes a lot easier to write other essays where you're taking essays. You're kind of being like, hey, this essay that I'm now going to write for this school is similar to this other school. And all we have to do is modify it a little bit. And it becomes just like an easier and less mentally daunting and less stressful process. Okay. The goal is every single application you do, you want to at least finish 2 weeks prior to the deadline. Granted, I know there's like finals in December, those types of things happen. And a lot of times we're working with some students at the last minute kind of, over the holidays. But this is like, just like, do it this way. Even if you don't work with us, do it this way, because your student will feel a lot better about themselves. They'll be a lot less stressed. You'll be a lot less stressed, and you'll feel really confident when you actually submit the applications that it's the best work. There's a lot of students that are way to the last minute. They're not as confident. And then if you don't get in, you're kind of thinking like, what if, right? We have a lot of students that come to us a lot of times in December of every year. They're like, hey, I didn't get into my top choice college early. And they're like, hey, can we work with a coach? And they're like, send us your essays. And we read the essays and we're like, wow, you left a lot of opportunity on the table, right? And they dramatically improve, and then they get into other colleges, but they're kind of always like, it's a challenging situation a lot of times for those students. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about prompt and the tonight only discount that we have. We have big discount tonight. Highly recommend just make a purchase tonight. It's completely risk-free, which we'll talk about. But basically, like, our philosophy is we want you to stop worrying. Like, our goal is for you to your students work smarter, not necessarily harder. You working with a prompt coach. We're kind of distilling like massive amounts of information about essays for you. So you don't have to do it. Your student doesn't have to do it. And our goal is for the applications that your student submits, that you and your student are confident in them. And we know that admissions officers are going to really like them. Okay. We're going to ensure your student actually completes their applications well in advance of deadlines. We have each student, we assign an advisor and a coach. Their advisor is responsible for keeping them on track with a timeline that the student sets with their advisor, okay, to get the work done. And we're really good about pushing and reminding students, and occasionally having to call parents if the students aren't responding to get the stuff done. And students are really good at getting the work done early. We also want to just save you time, reducing conflict. So I was just talking to somebody that whose daughter went through the admissions process last year. She was like, this is the worst experience of my life. There was like so much conflict with her and her daughter over like what was being written about in the essays, getting the essays done on time, providing feedback on the students' drafts, and it was just a mess. And she was like, where were you last year? It's like, well, we existed. We worked with 6,000 students last year. You could have found us, right? So, but it's just like, that's the type of thing that you want to avoid. You want to have a nice, fun experience, with the hopefully last year that your student is, living at home, full time. Okay. All right. So we're the leading application and essay coaching company. We're the highest rated company. We're the most recommended company. 3 and 4 students we work with get into 1 or more of their reach colleges, defined as where a highly selective institution like an IB or Ivy equivalent, or where they're academically below the average admitted student. Okay. So that's kind of falling into that academically sufficient category. For a reach college, we have a lot of success. And 98% get into at least 1 or more of their reach or target colleges. We have 0 role in selecting which colleges you're applying to. You're defining these things. So that's really good numbers, considering we have many students that are kind of reaching for the moon, and many of them get there. We get a bunch of acceptances to every college every year. We coached 6,000 students last year. We've worked with over 30,000 students just across our history and across all different things. We have 250 high schools that recommend us. And if you look at alternative solutions that might be somewhat comparable, we're actually half the price or less. Okay. We have a bunch of free resources, essay boot camps, reviews that we even provide to students eligible for free and reduced lunch programs. So we always get asked, like, what's the biggest value we provide? Okay. And we've kind of distilled down to like compelling content, make sure your content's compelling, clear writing, and accountability, right? Making sure your student gets the stuff done on time. So the 5 things to think about is we're developing your student's personal brand. We're helping them identify like which of those traits really are their strengths, right? And identifying what to write about for every single part of the application, right? Making sure your students' ideas are concise and compelling. The concise part of this is key. It's really, really important because we often see first drafts of essays from students and they're leaving a lot of opportunity on the table because they have never learned to write concisely. Instead, their teacher wants them, they're like, hey, write a 5-page paper. And the student's like, well, I could do it in 3 pages. And then they start writing a bunch of extra words to get it to 5. Well, in a college admissions essay, you got like 250 words or 650 words or 50 words, right? It's really hard. And what you want to do is we want to work with like an exceptional editor, right? That can help your student figure out how to say a lot in a very few words. So a lot of times a student will write a first draft. We're like, we don't care how long the first draft is, go for it. We'll get an 800-word first draft. And literally every single thing that they said in those 800 words can be fit in about 350 words. Okay? Because they're writing about stuff that's not needed. They're writing about stuff that it could be made way more concise. And those are the things that we're really working on with students. And that's really important because you have such a limited word count across your entire application that your goal is, how can I be as concise as possible so I can fit as much of my compelling content about who I am into my application as possible, okay? And we're gonna see some of that in the examples that we go through. We're gonna, as I always talk about, like, how do we make this more concise? Like, how do we like really reduce this to the main idea so we can fit more things in? Making your students' writing really clear. We talked about how important that is. And then finally, holding your student accountable, like making sure that they're getting the work done on time, right? We actually have like automatic text message reminders and all sorts of things that go out to make sure that they're meeting their deadlines that they have also played a role in setting, okay? All right, just a little bit about our coaches. We have over 100 writing coaches. We have the perfect coach for your student. We hire the top 2% of all coaches. We get thousands of applicants a year, and we hire 2%. We have a bunch of returning coaches every single year that come back and work with us. They enjoy it. And our coaches are reviewing hundreds of essays a year. It's not like we have, you know, this is a part-time actual like job for them. This isn't like a freelance thing. So we have the perfect coach for your student. We select those kind of based on your college list, your personality, ambitions, and then match that up kind of with our coach's personality, background, that sort of thing as well. Okay. And we work with every type of student, from struggling writers to really gifted writers, from students that are procrastinators to ones that are planners, from students with learning, students with learning disabilities, international students, English learners, just like you name it, right? We work with all sorts of different types of students. We have a lot of success, right? I already talked a little about how we work together, but there's kind of 2 options that we'll see. One-on-one, which is our most popular, is what the vast majority of students do, but we also have these small group essay boot camps, which is a really good option if you're kind of falling into the category where you might only be writing 1 or a few different essays, and the essays may not be as important for you. You can attend these kind of group sessions, 2 1.5-hour live sessions as a group, so you still get some individualized time, and you get 2 rounds of written feedback on your essay. Our one-on-one program, which I'll talk about more, has many more options where you can work on just 1 essay, or like the common application essay, or you can work on 3 schools, 6 school applications, 3 schools, 6 schools, or all of your schools. Okay. So tonight only, we have an extra big discount. We have an extra $100 off. That's that $399 price here. This is for just personal statement coaching, which is the common application essay or the applied Texas essay, or the coalition app essay. Okay. And you have one-on-one. We highly recommend doing that. If you have the chance, get that tonight. This is the lowest price we're going to offer all year, probably, to anybody.
And so just so people know that there's an email that will be sent out later.
Yeah, there'll be an email sent out. Yeah.
I mean, to be really honest, like, we work with Prompt and we encourage them to give you these discounts because we want you to act so that you just kind of get this done now. I mean,
yeah, you'll feel a lot better. Just like make the choice. It's totally satisfaction guaranteed. So if you get a full refund if you're not satisfied after your first coaching session. Basically, nobody ever takes us off on that because they're having a great experience. Okay. When you're doing your personal statement with us, most students finish within 2 weeks of starting in less than 8 hours total hours of their time, and they receive 4 to 5 hours of one-on-one coaching. Okay. If you don't know how much support you need, this is a great way to just get started. You can always upgrade later into complete application support, which I can recommend as well, but this is unlimited. Okay, so basically we keep working with your student until our coach, student, and you are confident in the application, the essay that you're submitting. Okay, that's how it works. All right. Okay, so next, complete application support. As I said, 3 schools, 6 schools, or all schools. On the landing page, you'll see 3 schools at all schools, but there's an option to see more options, and you'll see a 6 schools option as well. And this is literally all the essays for those schools. Okay, so that includes honors program essays, scholarship essays, extra essays for certain programs. It also covers your activities list if you have to write an additional information section. It covers every written component of the application. Completely unlimited support, once again. And depending on what you're doing and where you're applying, it might only take you 20 to 50 total hours of your time, of your students' time. Okay. And once again, that's really by working smarter and having really good stuff. And many students are receiving, sometimes they're receiving 15 hours of one-on-one instruction, sometimes 50 plus hours of one-on-one instruction for like our all schools offering, for example. So if you're applying to like many highly selective institutions like Ivy or Ivy equivalents, we recommend that all schools. If you are applying to, you're applying maybe early decisions somewhere to what you would consider a reach type institution, where you feel like you have a really good shot at it, but you know that essays are going to be really important. The 3 schools option is really good. It tends to be really, really good. And, you know, students are getting done with their top 3 choice applications. They're getting those done well in advance of the deadlines. You know, they're submitting those applications early, you know, there. So that is also a really common option. You know, the one that the most people do, just because they may not have as many supplements, is the personal statement coaching. The second most is the complete application support, and the third most is the 3 schools. But a lot of people do the 3 schools as well. Okay, and there's extra discounts, tonight only discounts as well. So once again, completely satisfaction guaranteed, basically risk-free in that regard. You can get a full refund if you're not satisfied after your first coaching session. Okay, so we're gonna get to live feedback on essays, but are there any questions on that? That we'll pull up the live feedback on essays.
No, I mean, there's a few questions, but it's more related to essay writing. So I think if we do
Okay,
a live,
awesome. Let's go ahead and do this. Let me make sure that I have the right screens up. And I will also just do a real quick show you before we get to the essays, kind of like some of the tools that you have access to, or you can get access to with prompts, because that tends to, people really enjoy that. And this is a good time of year for that. All right. So you'll see on the Road to College landing page, if you want to create a free account, you can either click sign up here, or you could scroll down here and you can just say, I'm just here for the free resources, and you can click here and sign up for a prompt account, and you get our prompt essay list builder and curriculum, okay, for free. And so you'll create an account and it'll look something like this. And what you can do is you could click on my schools, and I can add any school that I want to apply to here. So I can add like Auburn University, for example. Okay. You could set your interest level. So is it like one of your top choices, that sort of thing. And then I can actually see all the different essays that I need to write. Okay. So let's say I click on Columbia University. I could see the essays that I need to write for Columbia University. As you can see here, these haven't been updated yet. They haven't released them yet, but as they get updated, it will say current. Okay. And you can basically use this to work on all of your essays. You could click select essays here, and you can see all the optional essays you might need to write. So I have an extra one for the School of Engineering. You have this dual degree program, creative writing, or dance. Like there's so many different things, like this dual degree program. There's so many different kind of extra essays or a maker portfolio that you might submit. These are all things that a lot of students sometimes don't even realize till they start completing the application like the night before it's due, or the night of it being due. Okay. So it's better to just come in here and see like all the essays you need to write. Most of the essays stay pretty similar across years. There's maybe like 30% of essays that change and maybe 5% that change like in a major way. So even if even over the next couple of weeks before the common application is released, you can come in here and you can see, the approximate workload or the approximate things that you're going to have to do. The other thing that I just want to highlight is we have this brainstorm essays ideas section, and we have students that we work with go through these as well. The one that's we always recommend and have every student start with is what we call the application plan. And this talks through the 5 traits, like the goal of the application, improving success of college and beyond, the 5 different traits that colleges are looking for in students, and so on and so forth, so they could kind of rate themselves on their traits. And then we actually walk them through like brainstorming a bunch of different content, and then they can match this content to their essays later. Okay, so this is a tool that is still available if you go, create your free account, but we use this with many high schools that we work with. We use this with every student that we work with. It's a great tool that if you're planning to do this yourself, it's available to you. As I said, either just click sign up at the top, or you can go ahead and just scroll down here and click here for the free resources, right? And so on and so forth. Mine just logged me in automatically. Otherwise, it would show up as a thing to start with. Okay. All right. I'm going to pull up a couple of essays and let's go ahead and get started. Okay. I'm going to read these out loud. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. All right. I'm going to read these out loud. Then as I'm reading this, I want you to type in what are the 5 traits that you are what are the different traits that you're seeing a student exhibit, basically, as we're reading through this essay. And then I want you to think about, what did I learn about the student? That's the first question I always ask myself. The second is what didn't I learn about the student that I wanted to learn? And then the third thing that I always think about is like, how can I like restructure this or rearrange this to make it significantly more compelling? Okay. All right. 1 box, everlasting curiosity. In 5th grade, my mother bought me a scientific circuit kit called STEP circuits for my birthday. The packaging clearly showed it was for young adults, and the reaction of any elementary school aged kid sprouted. A frown and a bittersweetly mumbled thanks. As summer rolled around, boredom lurked, and from the inside out. So one night, my curious hands brushed the dust off the untouched circuit kit. Colorful cardboard packaging held a thick instruction book, small metal circuit connector pieces, a large baseboard, and other electronic miscellaneous items that were unrecognizable. Intrigued, I flipped the instruction book near the end, and before me lay a perfect, beautiful diagram of circuits, creating awe and confusion. Wondering how the little metal pieces in my hands could create such a complex, working technological array, I opened the book to the first diagram, and it was simply 4 connector pieces in a square with a light bulb and switch attached to one side of the shape. Pulling out the baseboard of the kit, placing the connecting pieces where instructed, and attaching the little light bulb and small switch piece to the connector pieces, I anxiously clicked on the switch. After a long 1 second, the light bulb dimly glowed and reflected onto my young, surprised face. Click, the light died out. Click, it's shown again. Craving a more complex arrangement, I created a working FM radio and listened contently to the assorted channels it was able to receive. With my curiosity piqued, and without the use of the instruction book, more fun systems were developed. Snapping those circuits helped me learn to fearlessly step outside my comfort zone, courageously dive into challenging problems, and continued to explore the unknown until feeling confidence in my abilities. This active dedication and loyalty to an unlikely subject has introduced me to a new passion, physical science. Solving equations until being rightfully rewarded and seeing the fruits of my labor pushes me to keep learning. To be eager in exploring physics and aerospace requires a curious, ambitious mindset, whether said mindset leads to sending rockets to space or snapping the last connecting piece onto a circuit board. I cannot wait to infinitely expand my curiosity and knowledge of physical sciences side by side with the infinitely expanding universe. And I see some notes here at the end. So somebody's taking notes on, I guess, live on this Google Doc too in the session. All cool. If this is you and you actually want to come up or your student and talk about this a little bit, you can unmute yourself and do so. As I said, drop into the chat what did we learn about the student, what didn't we learn, learn about the student, that we wanted to learn about the student. I have a million thoughts, or
Yeah,
a number of thoughts on this essay already. But
one or more of the 5 traits. What do you see in the essay?
yeah, exactly. So let's see what comes in the chat here.
Okay, anybody else? Oh, here we go.
You got some? All right. Dedicated to learning new things that eventually found the student's passion. Okay, intellectual curiosity. So here's a few really important. Yeah, want to know more about current engagement with physical science. Correct, right? Very good. All right, so here are a few things going on here. Okay. And by the way, we see this a lot of essays. So this is a fantastic example. Thanks for sending this in. So there's a lot of things going on here that basically we have essentially 2 entire paragraphs to get to all basically kind of existing in this 5th grade moment to some degree, with a little bit of, okay, I created an FM radio, curiosity peaked, and then now without the instructional book, I created more systems. Well, what were those systems? What did you do like that didn't require instructions? Now that you like kind of had the basics, like how did you get more advanced? Like where did you go with this, right? Not just with this, but maybe how does that relate to other things? Like, hey, you're interested in physical sciences. Like, what have you done associated with that? So in general, like if you're going to write about like this important moment that like piqued your interest and started this kind of you down this journey, what we call an inciting incident. So this is kind of an inciting incident. The inciting incident of this 5th grade moment in time type experience should not be what amounts to as, what is this? 260 of the 650 words that will be used, okay? This should be about 30 words, okay? And you could basically make the exact same point in maybe 30 to 40 words that you are making right now in 260 words, okay? And how do you do that, okay? Well, you can see here, there's a lot of extra pieces of information. So this is the beautiful prose that we talked about a little bit before, where, okay, do I really need to know about the colorful cardboard packaging, like taking all of this stuff out? I'm kind of intrigued. I bet you could get this all down into like, do I really need to know that the package was just for young adults, like how I reacted to it? Those things are less important, right? What really matters is, hey, in 5th grade, I got a scientific circuit kit. Doesn't even matter if it's for your birthday. Maybe you want that detail, maybe you don't, okay? Then it's like, at first, I did nothing with it. 2 months later, I was bored. I took it out and I created my first, I lit my first light bulb, right? Created a circuit that lit my first light bulb. Like already I'm here and I'm basically at 3 sentences, okay? I've said the exact same thing. Like what I was in awe, like was really excited. Then I created an FM radio, right? Then I created an FM radio and listened to tunes, right? Then all of a sudden I started doing stuff without the instruction book, right? And like that could be kind of the thing. And like now I always do instruction. I do everything without the instruction book. Maybe that's like the leading guiding sentence for the rest of the essay is like, I do everything without the instruction book, right? And so like, I'm constantly trying to figure things out myself, right? Learn new things, new ways of doing things, right? And now all of a sudden I've gotten this entire thing down into probably something that's going to be about 5 lines to the start of the essay, okay? The next part of this that I'm going to talk about is here. So this is where I call like waxing poetic or being really philosophical. A lot of students want to do this. And guess what? I learned almost nothing about the student as a result of this, other than that they think that they're doing something with challenging poems, but I don't know, like they're not proving it to me. They say they're exploring the unknown, but what unknowns are they exploring? They say that they have this passion of physical science, but prove it to me. They say they're solving equations, but what equations are you solving? Okay, like what, how, like, is it complicated? Is it beyond schoolwork? You say you need this ambitious mindset. Don't talk about the ambitious mindset. Prove to me you have an ambitious mindset. You don't have to say you have one. All right. And so this is just really common. A lot of students, and this tends to be a lot of students do this towards the end of their essay. Is they're like, hey, that second to last paragraph before my conclusion, I'm going to talk about what I learned about myself, but I'm also going to talk about my philosophy on like life almost, right? But they're not proving anything to me, like, and they're not proving to me that, hey, I learned this thing about myself, and here's how I applied that, right, into other areas, or I have this interest, and here's how I applied that into other areas. The actual actions that you took speak a lot louder than other things, right? And talking about outcomes and results, like, hey, I built this new thing, I built an FM radio. Boom, that's a result. Like I built it, result. I said a lot within a few words. Sometimes it's like, hey, I created a circuit with, 100,000 transistors on it, right? Like give me a little bit of detail on like how complex it was, maybe. I print my own circuit boards, right? Those types of things, right? I design and print my own circuit boards that do X, Y, Z. I made my own computer, right? These are things that's like very few words, talks about an outcome. A lot of times they have numbers involved with them. And I could say a lot within a few words. So hopefully that's kind of helpful. All right. Anything else on this essay, Debbie, that you wanted to cover?
No, just seeing if anybody else had any other comments.
No. All right.
Just one comment before you get to this. Oh, actually, this is perfect. I didn't even know that there was a question. Do you need a title?
No.
And this essay has the title. So
The Diffident Pageant Girl. Just one comment here. You have to think of, so a lot of people want to use big words in their essays. Okay. And the answer is big words decrease readability in a significant and substantial way. So anytime that you see a word that you think that the audience does not see very frequently, where they now need to slow down, pause, and think about what that word means, and maybe they don't even know what it means, that's not great. Okay. And even being somebody in this space, if you ask me like what diffident is, like I really need to think about it a little bit because I almost never see that word. Okay. And I write a lot. I write thousands of words a week and read probably tens of thousands of words a week, right? So this is like, you have to think about like, and by the way, everybody thinks like, oh, I need to sound really smart in my essay. The best way to sound intelligent is to what we call write simply. Okay. That means write very clearly and very readable so people easily understand what you're saying and your ideas. That's how that's how you define intelligence. Okay. And there's a whole bunch of research on that. So for example, there are people that speak more clearly or write more clearly that are like CEOs of large companies. Their stock performances are actually better than others. Okay, where they're able to articulate their ideas very clearly and simply. This really matters. And this really matters in college admissions essays. So I'm just going to highlight that because if we're working with the student, that's probably something that we would highlight. Not to say like, hey, like, don't do this. It's more of like, just be aware so you can make the decision yourself if that's what you want to do. And you don't need a title. A lot of times the title is just extra words, unless it like really just within a few words, like I get a very clear picture about what the entire essay is about and the outcome. And I don't really get that here. Okay. Because I'm like having to think like, what does this even mean? Okay. All right. Strutting down the stage in my kitten heels and beautiful bright red dress complementing the complexion of my cheeks, I kept up a gleaming, genuine smile for the entire 90 seconds. Okay. So real quickly, this is 31 words. Just to get to like writing simply, your first sentence, you want to be less than 10 words, generally. Okay, just one quick thing. I won't keep, I'll just read the rest of it, but that's always something that jumps out at me because I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't want to keep reading. You have to ease your reader into reading your essay. Ease them in, okay? Don't make it complex at the beginning. My mother's words seeped through my 11-year-old brain. Whatever happens, remember, you are always a winner. It is all a mindset. Butterflies fluttered through me as my piercing, bright blue eyes beamed with anticipation under the stage lights. My juvenile forgetfulness forced a smile on my face. Despite my timid yet tenacious nature, I was full of the fire for competition and the desire to be crowned. Growing up, I struggled with low self-esteem, negative self-talk, worry, and doubt controlled my life and filled my young, fragile heart. As a preteen, my negative prescriptive perspective of myself held me back from flourishing, as all I longed for was self-confidence. Concluding my first competition, I gained a subtle sense of self. So I unremittingly told myself pageants must be the answer to all my worries. Although I was being scored, I did not feel judged in the same way my thoughts would ridicule me. I begged my mom to enter me into my next pageant as soon as possible. She gleefully agreed, and instantly my mind began turning with ideas. However, the voices in my head felt challenged. I was conflicted. While I was so happy to dress up, prepare, and endure a robust intrinsic motivation to win, simultaneously my mind became full of entanglement and nervousness. One morning, nearly a year later, I woke up in a huff. I took deep breaths to help regulate my breathing and keep my frantic emotions under control. Today was no ordinary day. Today was pageant day. I leaped down my hall and shook my mom awake. As we got packed and ready to leave, everything felt surreal. Soon, I caught myself picking up all my insecurities in the car. My mom turned to me ever so carefully and began my interrogation. Is something bothering you, sweetie? You don't seem excited. Without thought, I shrugged my shoulders aside. She turned away. Turned back. Well, why not? I thought you enjoyed pageants. Finally, on the verge of tears, I collected my thoughts and carefully explained my dilemma. It's not that. It's just that all these mean and degrading voices, teardrops, drip down my cheeks, but I feel much better on stage. I can't explain it. Krista, pageants are not supposed to be stressful and scary. I signed you up to grow your self-confidence. You are supposed to feel happy and good about yourself when you are on stage. I was astonished at her response. I had it all wrong. Today, when you are on stage, I want you to tell yourself you got this. Remember what I told you. It's all a mindset. You're right, Mom, I exclaimed. Hours later, as I was about to stride onto the stage, I was a contradiction of emotions, full of anxiety and enthusiasm, testing my ankles in a new, higher pair of heels. I did just as I remembered. As I heard my contestant number, I jumped onto the stage and visualized my distressing beliefs, and step by step, I began to trample away all my nerves. Glancing at the beautiful crown, it sparked and beamed back at me. I felt powerful and determined. I felt worthy of the crown. Today, I continue with pageants and interpret life is all a mindset to remind myself that I can achieve anything I put my mind to as long as I vow to stay positive and true to myself. While there are still times when it feels like my insecurities come close to swallowing me, I choose to push past my fears, remain enthusiastic, and mentor young women by sharing how I reshape my mindset. I am no longer the diffident pageant girl, but rather the unapologetically confident beauty queen. All right, drop it to the chat. What did we learn about the student? How does that relate to the 5 traits? What didn't I learn that I wanted to learn? Some drive, more details on mentoring. Yeah, so that's good. All right. So a couple of things here. One of the most important things is understanding where the essay is going. Okay. And I didn't really have that sense, or like I was conflicted at different points in the essay of like, I was thinking to myself as I was reading, and you kind of heard me stumbling over some words because I was like trying to think, I'm like, my mind is racing because I'm like, where is this going? Like, how is this relevant? Like, what is occurring here? And your reader will stumble over words too, or slow down, or have some difficulty in different places because of those types of things, or more difficult language. And those are things that you want to avoid. So in here, you know, right here, okay, butterflies, I'm in this pageant, great. Tenacious nature, timid but tenacious nature. But now I see all of a sudden I'm thrown to this loop where it's like low self-esteem, negative self-talk. So, you know, I thought here is going to be maybe about their journey through like different pageants, kind of like how they improved, whatever. Now I'm learning like, okay, maybe this is about low self-esteem, negative self-talk, and how they got past that. But then it felt like, oh, maybe that's not the challenge here. But then maybe, okay, then it becomes the challenge again. And I'm just kind of like, I'm just not clear where it's going. Or like, when I relate this back to the 5 traits, like, how is this really important? I'm actually left thinking at the end of the essay of, okay, she's pushing a bit through these situations, but is it resolved?
Yeah.
Unclear.
Yeah. Unclear.
Okay. Now, not everything has to be resolved, right? I understand that like it's different things are challenging. We all have different mindsets that we struggle with, like always, right? But it's still this line around, okay, it feels like my insecurities are come close to swallowing me. It's like, well, that might, I'm unclear like how like what actions you took to change your mindset and get past that, like what things actually happened maybe during the pageant or actions that you took that actually like made you starting to feel more confident, and then how did you apply those actions maybe outside of the pageant environment to other situations in your life. Okay, those are the things that are really important here. This piece around mentoring young women.
Is there too much detail, I guess, about also the insecurities?
Yeah, there's a lot. Like what it comes down to is I bet you could take this entire thing if you really wanted to write about the pageant and basically, the general gist of the essay is you could pretty much write like that, I was maybe you start with like, I struggle, it's almost like you could literally just write, I struggled with self-esteem until I started doing pageants, right? It hasn't always been easy, but I've learned to kind of like persevere through, build confident self-talk, these sorts of things, take actions that resulted in me like becoming like, the crowned beauty queen. Okay. Then it's like, here's how I did that. And here's how that applies to other areas of my life. Okay. So you distill a lot of this down, right? So a lot of this is, when we take a look at the language here is, people want to include a lot of details, and sometimes like details are useful because it makes it real, but you don't need to apply too many details. Like a lot of times a detail doesn't need to be multiple sentences. It could just be like 2 words here or there, right? Or even like an adjective here or there that could really make it real in somebody's mind. But the key here is like, there's a couple of things that jump out, right? This mentor young women, or like, how do you apply that? How did you apply like your confidence that you're getting in the pageants to other areas of your life? Because if you're insecure just in general, but you're more self-confident in pageants, like how is this like manifesting itself overall, the confidence that you found by doing pageants? Okay. So like that is kind of the critical angle here. And as I said, like you could kind of start this essay in a way that like very crisply gets to the point of like, this is kind of what the essay is about. Okay. It's not like you need a thesis statement, but it's what I call a guiding sentence where, okay, here's like, after I read the first few sentences of your essay, I need to have a pretty good understanding of like where the essay is headed. Okay. When you watch a movie, most movies you watch, you're like, within the first 5 minutes of the movie, you probably have a pretty good idea of how the movie's going to end and how it's going to progress. Okay. That's just like a storytelling technique that's as old as time, right? I need to be able to understand this because otherwise it's hard for me to follow the through line of the story and understand what's important and what's not important. Okay. All right. I think that's probably it for what we have time for. We could take questions that people have and talk about coaching or anything like that. I don't think we probably have enough time to go through.
Yeah, there's a question, and I was going to bring this up because it's in the essay you just read. What about the use of quotes?
I usually quotes for like language of what people said and did. I usually say like fairly sparingly, although I've seen a couple of situations where like there was some actual like dialogue that somebody included. And that's okay, because people know that it's probably not the exact words you said, right? But sometimes it could paint a picture, but a lot of times, most essays that I read are usually better without them. But in certain situations, you can actually say more and get further to where you're going to. You can say more in fewer words by doing it, okay? Or you could paint the picture a little bit better in fewer words by doing it. What I will say is, generally speaking, don't include quotes from other like famous quotes from other people. Okay. Like, you know, nobody wants to read another essay with a Mahatma Gandhi quote in it. Like just nobody. Okay. Because what it does is it uses valuable word count to talk about somebody else's ideas instead of your own experiences, actions, and your ideas. Okay. So that's generally a don't do.
Okay.
There's obviously exceptions for everything, but yeah.
A question about, is middle school too far back to use as an example in the college essay?
Generally speaking, you can have like a couple sentence anecdote type experience from like something that's earlier in life than high school, but it's really hard to write an essay that's 100% about like a middle school experience. Okay. It can be like a really strong inciting incident for your future journey of what you want to cover, in which case it's so important that you need to cover it, in which case, like, as I said, like a couple sentences, a few sentences can work.
What about, somebody's asking, is it okay to write in the third person, but make it clear it's about the student? A little tricky, right? A little tricky to pull
The
it off
most
well.
important thing is like, what do we learn, right?
Right.
We learned that
Simple.
simple is important, clear is important, readability is important. Your average sentence length, a lot of times I check. So that essay that we just read, the average sentence length is probably between 15 and 20. It was a bit much. I usually like to recommend like 12 to 14. The New York Times is 15. Romance novels have an average of 10. Like that's how simple they are. Action novels are 12. I think mysteries might be 16. The stuff that nobody wants to read in the world, which are like academic journals, are like 20. Okay, so like nobody wants to read that. So like think like writing simply is really important. And if you're writing in the third person, that may make it way more difficult for the person to actually read your essay and understand who the heck you're talking about at any given point in time. Okay, you don't want to do that. Like I have to read like what it is to really tell you, like, can I understand this or not? Or I'm like really having to work to think of it. But anytime like a good trick when you give somebody an essay, because never give somebody an essay to read and be like, give me feedback on this. Never ask that, because that person always will feel like I have to give feedback. And now they're going to get feedback on the wrong things because they don't understand what college admissions officers are looking for. So instead, if you give it an essay to somebody, the easiest thing to do is say, read my essay, and I want you to circle where you're unclear about something or you find yourself slowing down as you are reading. Okay, that's a good trick, because what that does is any place that they circle, you need to revisit and determine whether or not you can write that more simply and clear. Okay, that's what we basically do as we read through stuff, right? It's like that we're identifying that and then identifying how to improve it.
What about word count? People are just there have been a few questions about what's the minimum that word counts for an essay.
If it's a 650 word essay, I would say the minimum word count is 645 words that you should use. Okay, you should use all of the words. That's basically what it comes down to, right? Anytime you're not using the words, you are leaving opportunity on the table for your reader to better understand who you are. Okay. That's the general gist of it. Now, if there's no word limit on the essay, usually like you could usually say what you're going to say in about 600 to 650 words. That's why the common application essay is 650 words. It's a pretty good number. I find like 500 is a lot of times a little too short sometimes for the amount of content that you want to cover in this type of essay. A bunch of the 250 word essays or 150 word essays, like
they're hard.
They're hard. Like yeah. A lot of people are like, oh, it's short, it should be pretty easy. No, those are the hardest ones, because you got to really figure out how
every word counts.
Every word counts.
Yeah.
And a lot of times students take so what we do a lot of times is we have students start, if they're applying to the University of California, we'll have them write these 350 word essays for the University of California. And it's like, well, guess what? Now we got to take the 350 word essay and turn it into a 250 word essay. And then you take that 250 word essay, sometimes it turns into a 150 word essay. So you really got to prioritize and figure out how to cut not just like parts, like big chunks of content, but like how do you like really reduce sentence length in many cases to say as close to as much as possible as you can, right? It's really challenging, right? That's what like a good writing coach does. I mean, that's what we do.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
I hope everyone got good information tonight. I mean, whether, hopefully you'd see value in working with prompt, but also I think you just got value from listening tonight and understanding what admissions officers are looking for and how to help your student write their essay and nothing else, plan and start now.
Yep. And the one thing I'll say is if you want to contact me, I'm at brad@prompts.com. So if you sent me a direct message during this, which some people do sometimes, I definitely did not read that because I'm talking the whole time. So if you have a question for me, you can email me at brad@prompts.com about anything. That's perfectly fine. We also have a chat on our website, or on our website, you can book a call with a writing coach to chat through things in the situation. So all of those are kind of options for you. We have the extra discount tonight. If you're
Yeah, I was gonna say, some people had
take
asked
advantage
me
of it.
about the discount and I just want, an email already went out. So you should have that information in your inbox. And hopefully, you're interested in taking advantage.
Yep. And as always, Debbie, thanks for having me. A lot of good questions from everybody here.
Thank you, Brett. I
this
always
evening.
I love when you read the essays, I mean, that people have submitted, because you've truly never looked at them before. And so it's
No,
great that-
I actually hate. I refuse to look at them before I actually do it live. So, but it's fun for me because now that I run the whole company, we have like well over 100 writing coaches. I do a lot less of the actual
Right.
essays now. So I always enjoy it. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. And as I said, if you have any questions, you can write me at brad@prompt.com. And we look forward to working with you. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Good night.